Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Jay Stoyan. You're watching the Today Show in Halton, our flagship show where we showcase abilities, entertainment, information, education, and awareness. And right now, I want to welcome to the show, I want to welcome world-renowned jazz drummer, Dan Bodanis. Dan, thanks for being on the show today.
Jay, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. And, I'm a big fan of yours, and your family's amazing. Your dad, I've been a fan of because he's a legendary Toronto Marlies hockey defenseman from the 1950s. And so I'm a huge fan of the Stoyan family, in addition to being a fan of yours. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. I don't want to tell our viewers that we have our strong Macedonian connection. Dan's dad and our family musically inclined at the weddings.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful. And Dan is I know your family's such a pillar of the community. I know you live out in the Halton region, Mississauga, Peel. So this is great. So let's get right into it, Dan, and tell our viewers a nice tagline of your musical career, and then I can sort of pick your brain and we can go through your great career.
It's hard to encapsulate, but I'll start by saying the Toronto Musicians Association, which is we affectionately refer to as our musicians union. It's not a union, but they're a wonderful collective of people who really take care of setting kind of a context, if you will, from which professional musicians can operate. And then each professional musician is allowed to place into that context the content of what their musical offering is to the world. So the Dan Bodanis Band is a band that I formed many, many years ago. And we play primarily jazz. I had many, many successful years as a studio musician, playing at a Grant Avenue studio in Hamilton with Danny Lanois, who's now Danielle Lanois, and many other people. I played on the TV show Live It Up with Ed Roth out of Grant Avenue, and did many jingles and all kinds of recordings there. But the great thing about you mentioning the Macedonian connection, my father is now 94, and he's not really a Zoom guy or a TV guy these days, but if you were to talk to him, he'd tell you that he's probably the most beloved band leader in the Macedonian community, and his band works so often that if a bride and groom couldn't get his band for a Saturday or Sunday night at the venue that they wanted, they would actually move their wedding to a Friday night just to have my father's band. And I was lucky enough in 1971, when I was 12 years old, for my father to take me to the Toronto Musicians Association, our union, sign me up. And, you asked me for a tagline. Well, the Toronto Musicians Association just encapsulated my 50 years career as a professional musician by a beautiful letter, a Zoom call, and a pin acknowledging the fact that I indeed have been a professional drummer for 50 years, 50, which It doesn't feel like that because I don't even feel like I'm 50 years old.
Congratulations, Dan. Congratulations. That's quite the accomplishment. Wow. That's stellar. Now, let me ask you, because I'm just quoting, I think that Jerry Doucette, who's jazz can play it when he's much older, right? So they can play jazz when they're. So tell me though, but jazz is like the hardest, like out of the genres as far as I hear, and like you got to be really established to play a jazz instrument or jazz, music. I guess. Tell me your take on it.
Well, what's interesting, having the father I did, I was so blessed. He is such a great musician, a great man who always hired the finest musicians and paid them the most money, treated them really respectfully, always made sure they were fed at each gig. But the ancillary benefit was he always got me the best drum teachers. And the first thing my dad said is, you got to learn how to read music. And I actually learned how to read music before I could read and write the English language. And then very early in my career, I was turned on to big band music and jazz. My dad was is a saxophone player. Okay. And, so hearing him play all the time, he eventually started taking me to gigs. I was the band boy, which in today's parlance would be, I was the roadie. I'd help the musicians schlep their gear in and out of the gigs. I'd go get them drinks at the bar back when you could do this without having to have an age of majority card.
Yeah,
I was 7, 8, 9 years old, going to every gig. And my dad would actually pay me to do this. But nice. the ancillary benefit of that was I learned jazz, I learned repertoire, and I got a chance to watch how professional musicians govern themselves on stage in terms of their professionalism. The fact that no matter what happened in their day, prior to coming to the gig, they'd leave it off stage, get on stage, and be really, really professional. And we talked about the fact that you asked me about jazz, and jazz is one of those things where you never learn it all, and it's an evolving, continual, lifetime dedication to self-improvement. And for a drummer, what that specifically means is if you're playing the jazz ride cymbal pattern, which everybody knows is ding, 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 or in the hi-hat. If you're playing that, then what is your left hand going to do? What is your right foot going to do? What is your left foot going to do? And those things are what we call independence exercises, where you actually strive to have your hands and your feet operating independently so that they can have a conversation with them within themselves that serves and complements the music. And so if a piano player is playing a particular pattern, or a guitar player, or trumpet player, or sax player is playing a particular pattern, you want to be able to catch that pattern sometimes to complement them, and maybe to take them in the direction they're going, or to inspire them musically to go in a different direction. And ideally, you want to have that ride cymbal pattern or hi-hat pattern play with, excuse me for this metaphor, musicians will fight me on this, but almost like a machine. It's a machine with feel, with good time and all the rest of it, but so that it doesn't change. It doesn't, it doesn't speed up or slow down. And you want to be able to play with your left hand and your feet completely independent of that ride cymbal pattern so that you can inspire and serve the music as best as possible. So jazz is an evolving lifetime dedication to study. Learning rock and Latin and everything else. I had a great drum teacher from Hungary. He was like the Buddy Rich.
Oh, yeah.
Considered one of the best drummers who ever lived, if not the best. And my teacher was like the Buddy Rich of Hungary. His name was Gabor Zakli. And Gabor always said to me, when other musicians hear you play rock, you want to leave them with the impression that that's the only thing that you're good at because you're so good at it. But then when you switch to Latin or jazz, you want them to think, oh, that's all he can play. He's such a great jazz drummer or such a great Latin drummer. That's all he can play. And he said, you want to have a mastery of every genre or every idiom musically. And so, in 50 years of playing professionally, and the 7 years of drum lessons leading up to that, from the time I was 5, there's a big math problem there for mathematicians to solve. I've probably had 35 years of drum lessons.
Well, let's hold that thought, Dan. Let's take a quick commercial break, and we're going to come back. And I want to ask you a little bit. I mean, there's so much more to ask you, but we're going to tie in a little bit the community with both of our relations. And but keep that thought, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with today's show and drummer Dan Bodanis.